Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague, Russell Berger, both attorneys at Offit Kurman. And today we are talking about terminating employees and the factors that go into determining whether to terminate someone, whether to keep them, what the risks are associated with that. Because a lot of times it's not an easy cut and dry decision on the part of an employer. So what are some things that employers should be considering in that regard, Russell?
Yeah, well, to start, I mean, there's a couple situations where, the decision to terminate just kind of has to be made, whether it's because an employee poses a physical threat to another employee or because, that the employee is engaged in some sort of harassment or discrimination that's so extreme that the only way to deal with it is to terminate the employee. Those are kind of easier questions from a legal risk calculus standpoint. But a lot of things kind of fall in this gray area where there's the HR risk, there's the risk of getting sued for a wrongful termination or creating the wrong message with your employees. And on the other hand, there's the if I keep this person around, I have operational risk. Am I stuck in a situation where we're underperforming or it's creating a bad culture because we've let someone stay who shouldn't still be here. So a lot of what I think has to go into that decision is where do both those risks fall? How do I assess both aspects of this so that then I can bring it together as the general counsel or as the business owner, and make a determination about, well, look, the operational risk is too high, and I know I've got some employment risk, but I need to go forward and make this balanced judgment.
Yeah, and then once you do make that decision too, there's ways to obviously, try to limit the risk even in the way that you do it, how you approach the termination. Because a lot of it's the practical piece as well, like what's going to happen in that moment, how are they going to respond, and we've talked about that on here before, obviously, as far as preparing for terminations and what to do as far as shutting off access. Another factor that goes into also, I think, determining whether you want to terminate someone. So sometimes maybe someone's in breach of their agreement or something. So let's say they're interfering with some relationships or they're considering leaving. I know that we get calls like that where it's like, well, I found out that my employee might be looking to go to a competitor. Those are also tricky ones a lot of times too, because there's the emotional part, I think, on the behalf of the business owner. Well, they're considering leaving me, and that doesn't feel good in any context, whether it's a business or personal relationship. No one likes that, right? So that's a challenging one, and there's a lot of knee-jerk reaction that can go on there. But sometimes you got to look also, well, is this a talented employee? Why might they be looking elsewhere? Is termination really what I want to do because it's, a concern with loyalty and sometimes the answer is yes, like, look, I can't have someone going and talking to competitors and maybe they shared information. Maybe it's a little bit more, concerning than just having a conversation or interviewing with other companies. But sometimes it might be a really good employee and there might just be something laying under the surface that an employer hasn't discovered, and termination isn't the right scenario, even though it doesn't feel good that they're looking elsewhere. So there's scenarios like that as well that, just like a lot of things when we talk about on OK at Work, that just kind of taking a moment, taking a breath, taking a look at it, weighing the options, trying to get to the bottom of the facts and what's really happening can be helpful as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's good advice because I mean, really, what I think we keep saying in different ways here is, think it through. Like, there's a lot of moving parts in an employment decision because there's, that specific employee, there's the other employees that work with them, there's the manager, there's the business's operations, there's the business's customers, and all these things can be impacted by an employment decision, and negatively and positively. So, before you make a decision to terminate someone, what I really think, anybody ought to do is kind of, again, assess all the different factors, throw that all into the pot. And, sometimes certain risks or certain issues are going to be stronger than others. Sometimes they might all be roughly equal. But I think it's a part about, it's important to do that piece by piece consideration, given the circumstances, given the context, so that you can evaluate, like, well, is the business really, what are the business's goals? Is it better served by making, the decision to terminate or to not terminate? How is that so? And then going forward, hey, I'm doing what's best for the business. It's not an easy call one way or the other, but I'm doing what's best in this given circumstance.
Yeah, and while you want to also be very detailed in your approach, you don't want to let things sit for too long though either, because sometimes things will change. Sometimes the change, if you let something sit, a decision like this sit, sometimes things change and you get new information in a good way, a positive way, you know, that extra information is helpful. Well, sometimes things deteriorate in a bad direction. So while you want to be thorough and detailed in your analysis and your approach, that is not synonymous with just kind of burying your head in the sand, hoping it goes away, right? So
Yeah.
Never
Our advice. Always be proactive, and yeah, I mean, do the calculus, but do it promptly, quickly, with the information you have on hand. Sometimes you might need to do a little bit of fact finding, but by and large, most of the time you have almost all the facts at hand anyway. And then one last point, and it's not right in every situation, but there's always the possibility of using a severance agreement where you pay someone a severance, and in exchange you get released from claims. That's always an option to try to hedge some of the risk. Again, there are right times to use it. There are probably wrong times to use it, but it's another tool at your disposal that may help mitigate the risk and shift some of those balances.
Yeah, that can be a great tool. Well, thanks, Russell. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sarah.